Let's talk about the demo for Final Fantasy XV Episode Duscae. Specifically, let's talk briefly about a couple of things that I liked, and then at length about things that I didn't like, and how they could be potentially fixed in the final product. Before we start, know that I won't be talking about the frame rate or the graphics or any issues like that. These issues are all things that the developer has already acknowledged and said that they're working on fixing before the final product comes out. Starting up here, I would like to say to anyone working at Square or anyone on the development team who happens to be watching this that you've done a really impressive job so far. I'm working under the assumption that the game will still be in development for at least a year, and with that in mind, everything here looks really impressive. I did encounter a couple of pretty awful glitches during my time with the demo, but other than that, the game looks really impressive. There's a lot of detail on everything from the cracks in the worn country road to the ornate posts that the chocobos are tied to, and the particle effects. I like the weapon system so far. My only complaint is that, aside from the stats associated with them, the two swords and the two lances are somewhat interchangeable in terms of how they actually play. That said, I can't wait to have access to a full arsenal of weapons and start really messing around with this system. That is, assuming that you expand upon the types of weapons that we have access to. If there's only these and one or two more classifications of weapons, it would be somewhat disappointing. But for now, it's a promising system and I can't wait to mess around with it more. I like Noctis's friends, and I've been thinking that I wouldn't for the longest time. They don't have enough random dialogue for while you're going around in the field, and I heard lines repeated a lot, but I assume that's a result of this being a demo. What little dialogue they do have is pretty decent and establishes the relationships that these characters have with each other solidly. Their interactions amongst themselves, among the other characters, are reasonably believable and frequently funny. I particularly enjoy the ending scene of the demo where Gladiolus and Prompto continuously flirt with and are effortlessly deflected by Sydney. Or is it Cindy? Make up your minds. Okay, well, it's great to talk about things that I like. Let's face it, you're here because you want to hear me tear the demo apart. Well, without further ado, let me talk about the absolute biggest problem with this game so far: the targeting system. Allow me to explain how the targeting system in this game works. To lock onto an enemy, the player has to hold down R1. If you release it too quickly, you won't finish actually locking onto the enemy. You have to hold down the button for a second or so for the lock-on to take effect. However, what you see here is not really a lock-on. As you can see, I'm only fighting one enemy, and I can move the camera around as much as I like. The camera will always go back to my target when I let go of the stick, and will remain focused on them unless I cancel the lock-on. However, if I'm fighting multiple enemies at a time, this is not the case. As I move the stick, the lock-on shifts between my different available targets, usually focusing on whichever enemy is centermost in the screen. Because of this, I call this first lock-on a soft lock-on. The game's real lock-on, what I call the hard lock-on, is achieved after you have a soft lock-on and press R3. This causes an additional ring to appear around your target. The camera still behaves similarly, but it will no longer switch targets if you're fighting more than one enemy. The lock-on remains directed at the specific enemy no matter where you turn the camera. This system presents a number of problems and is in general just kind of awkward to work with. For one, I'm not sure I understand the purpose of making the player hold down R1 instead of just, tapping it. Is it in case you change your mind and suddenly decide, oh, never mind, I was just kidding, I don't want to lock on after all? Even then, I don't think making the player hold it down is necessary because basically everything you do cancels your lock-on. Pressing R1 cancels your lock-on, healing yourself or a party member cancels your lock-on, as do a number of other actions in the game. This is pretty cumbersome. Several times I've been in the middle of a fight and needed to run away to heal myself or an ally, which forced me to lose my lock-on. I then have to waste time locking onto the person I was fighting again, which is especially cumbersome if I'm fighting multiple enemies. As I was saying before, to lock onto different enemies, you must first initiate the soft lock-on, then move the stick around until you find the enemy that you want to fight. I do understand the idea behind not making things like, a normal lock-on system, like in, any other action game. In most systems like this, the player would have a single button that they tap to cycle through all enemies in their range. They can press it repeatedly until they find the enemy they're trying to target. This can, admittedly, take a little bit too long, especially if you press one too many times and have to go all the way back around again to find your desired enemy. Here, the developers are trying to make it so that the player has a lot more choice here. You find the person you want to target yourself. If they're on the right, you look right. If they're on the left, you look left. But this system simply doesn't work. It's clunky, it takes too much time, and quite frankly, While it may look useful here when I'm a ways away from actually fighting, once you're in the middle of combat, it's a nightmare. You don't have time for all of these steps when you're in the thick of it. Hold down a button, turn the camera frantically trying to find the one person you want to target, and when you finally find them in the midst of being beaten up, press another button. Also, hope you don't have to heal yourself after you take that beating, because you're going to lose your lock-on again. This is also frustrating when you manage to whittle down an enemy to very low HP, but then you wind up locking onto another enemy with high HP, and the low HP enemy is still out there somewhere, dealing damage when you could have finished him off if you could just find your target easily. But the most annoying thing is when you're fighting the Behemoth. He's got two very specific weak points, and it's difficult to get a soft lock-on to land on one of those weak points. Additionally, he's constantly running around and you're constantly turning your camera, and as a result, it's even harder to get your crosshairs onto his weak point for long enough to hit R3. To make matters worse, when you fight him on the overworld, Deadeye likes to sprint away out of your range, which means that when he comes back, you have to establish your lock-on again. Plus, I'll repeat, healing your allies breaks your lock-on. I swear, I feel like I spent more time trying to lock on to Deadeye than I did actually fighting him. I honestly do understand what the developers were going for with trying to use the stick to pick out a target. I can especially see how it'd be useful when you're up on a warp point like this and trying to figure out a specific enemy to warp strike onto. But, well, like you can see, even this system doesn't work well. I'd much prefer to just be able to cycle through enemies like you see here. I would gladly take the loss in choice for the gain in control, consistency, and reliability. Really, this whole process can be streamlined. Why not have an auto lock-on system like you see in Kingdom Hearts, or the old trailers for Versus 13, or even the 2013 trailer for 15? You press a single button. Press, not hold, and this locks you onto whatever enemy the auto-targeting has already picked out. You can then either focus on attacking that enemy, or start cycling through targets. Allow me to point out that the R2 and L2 buttons are completely unused with the current control scheme, and if we're ditching this soft lock-on and hard lock-on system, you can also use R3 for this, since we no longer need to switch from a soft lock-on to a hard lock-on. This is a fast-paced action game, guys. There's no need to belabor something that should be simple, fast, and convenient. Speaking of R3, let's have a look at L3. That is to say, the sprint function. First off, I like that you don't make us hold down L3 to keep Noctis sprinting. All you need to do is click it once, and Noctis starts off sprinting and keeps going. That's great. However, there is a small issue with this. Noctis has a tendency to get worn out after he sprints for a long time. That's fine. But there's not a convenient way to stop him from sprinting once he starts. There currently exist two options to get Noctis to stop sprinting. The first one involves completely pulling back on the stick to stop all of his forward momentum, and then pushing forward again without clicking in the stick. The other option is to let Noctis sprint until he tires himself out, which commits you to several seconds of watching Noctis catch his breath and wipe the sweat away. Can I propose that, since you can press the stick in and then release it to initiate a sprint, you let us similarly click the stick in during a sprint to cancel it. This allows the player to stop sprinting before Noctis wears out without having to cancel their forward momentum. In a game that seems to be entirely about maintaining momentum and a smooth flow, I think this is a no-brainer. I want to be able to stop sprinting without completely stopping. Also, since I'm talking so much about canceling things, what's up with canceling the side quests? I assume that the line of thinking here is, oh, these quests are very simple, and if the player doesn't finish them right away, then you might as well get them out of the user's way because they aren't interested. Perhaps your motivation is that, in the full game, the user is going to be able to drive and quick travel and thusly get through areas like the space of this demo extremely quickly. Thusly, the thinking may be that you don't want to clutter the user's quest list with a bunch of minor quests that are halfway around the world. That makes sense to me. However, at least in this demo, I'm picking up side quests every 2 minutes. Night may be bearing down, or I may be in the middle of doing something else, or I might have just gotten all my buffs from camping and I don't want to waste it because I'm on my way to a dungeon or a boss. So then, if I want to do that side quest, I have to go and remember the area where I picked it up originally. What's the gain here? To keep the quest list uncluttered? Why not just organize the quest list better? Let me personally decide what quests are high priority or low priority. For me, I can sort the quests the way that I want and hide unimportant ones in a different menu. That way, if I'm looking to get some more experience, or perhaps I'm going for 100% completion of the game, I can just open up my low priority quest log and there they all are. When you cancel these quests every night, the message you're sending to players is, hey, here's something to do. You want to drop everything else you're doing and do this right now, right? Oh, you don't? Well, I guess you didn't want to do it at all then. We'll clear it from your menu next time you go camping. Oh, and speaking of camping, I like the system, but can I request one change? I really need to be able to pick what Ignis cooks. Let's say that I know I'm on my way to a dungeon, or a really tough boss, and I want to be able to cook beforehand and get the best buffs that I can. But let's say that I only have one or two of the extremely expensive or rare ingredients that I need for the particular meal I want. After all, I would assume that the final game is going to have much more expensive ingredients and also much better buffs. The point is, if Ignis always cooks the best thing that he has, I may be wasting my ingredients a full day before I reach my destination. At the very least, if you don't want to provide the player with a complete list of options of what to make every single night, allow the option to select between the best thing or just plain toast. If I want to conserve my ingredients, I should be able to make Ignis cook something that doesn't expend anything. It would be nice to have a full list of options whenever I cook, but if we can't do that, at least give me a choice between the $200 New York steak or the buttered toast. One of the criticisms I've heard most frequently has to do with the defense and attack functions, or more specifically, switching between them. As of right now, there's not really an expedient way to break Noctis out of a combo, either to switch to a defensive stance or simply to run away for whatever reason. I do understand that if the player could cancel attacks instantly and go into a defensive stance whenever they liked, it would bring the difficulty down considerably, and it would make the defensive stance pretty overpowered. But even with that being said, I think that you should still allow players to cancel out of attacking and into defense a little bit more easily. Using the defensive stance already drains your MP so quickly, I don't think there's much of a reason to prevent your player from getting into it. Quite frankly, by limiting my access to the defensive stance, you're making the MP I lose from it less important. I can't feel as if I'm losing resources if I can't access those resources in the first place. If you give players more opportunity to use the guard, they're more likely to overuse it and run out of MP, and that's what you want, right? Of course, I understand why you don't want players to be able to cancel any combo whenever they like. Your combat system is largely built around the shifting paradigms of smaller, faster weapons and larger, slower ones. If you allowed us to cancel out of the Zweihander's long wind-up whenever we liked, there wouldn't be much of a point to it. The entire point of the Zweihander is to leave the player vulnerable while they're using it. Well, why not make that an effect of the weapon itself? These weapons have effects like MP drain, increased critical damage, and the like, so why not make some of them have a debuff preventing you from canceling out of an attack? Say that I can hit L1 anywhere in the middle of an attack with the Avenger or the Bloodsword, and it will almost instantly make Noctis stop his combo and enter the defensive stance, even if I'm still hitting square. In this case, the L1 button would be overriding the square button, but the Zweihander would have a debuff on it that makes it impossible to cancel out of a combo in this way. It would work the way that it does in episode Duscae, where you can't end the attack until the game lets you. This way, you can afford players enough control to do what they want when they want, but in specific places where affording that control would be detrimental to your intended design, you're actually making it part of the game. A disadvantage. A debuff. Since we're on the weapons anyway, I need to make one very specific request regarding the special abilities. Make this menu show multiple things at once, the thing you're selecting and the things next to it, because when I'm scrolling around, I don't know what my next ability is going to be. I'm blindly going through this list, hoping that I find the thing that I want next, because I haven't memorized it yet. Honestly, just rip off the ability UI from Birth by Sleep and Dream Drop Distance, because it works perfectly fine. Make your horizontal menu vertical, and you're golden. Also on the UI, you need to change how you're displaying the character's health. I know that you're trying to emphasize that this is a Final Fantasy game, and that your party is important in gameplay, and so you've made all these health bars the same size, but no, not when I am almost always surprised when Noctis gets knocked out. The health bar is so small that when I'm focused on the action, I almost never notice that Noctis is about to hit 0 HP. There's no flashing lights, no sounds, or at least nothing impactful enough that I notice while I'm in danger. I'm not necessarily saying that you should add in a loud, annoying warning sound like the ones you see in a lot of action games from Kingdom Hearts to Zelda, but you seriously need to do something to let me know. In Kingdom Hearts, I never even have to directly look at my health because it's this huge, fat, green bar in the corner. I can clearly see it in my peripheral vision. I'm not suggesting that you adopt a UI similar to Kingdom Hearts with its huge, cartoony life bar in the corner, but you definitely need to do something so that I know when Noctis is about to go down. I promise I'm winding down here. I've only got a couple more things to say. First off, the game's manual dodge. why does it cost the same amount as the automatic one? I know that it sends you way farther and that you might technically be able to get out of the way of more attacks with this than you can with the automatic one, but I still gotta ask, why are you charging me the same amount of MP to use what is a normal, functional part of an action game as you do for the more simplified, easy-to-execute version of the move? I'm not saying make it free, because that breaks the entire MP economy that you're building the gameplay on, but at least make it cheaper, maybe. Also, a note on the music. It all sounds pretty good, but the time that I spent just walking around was eerily silent. I do understand why you don't have an overworld theme, of course. You spend way more time outside of battles in this game than you would have done in previous Final Fantasy games that relied on fairly consistent random encounters. Here, an overworld theme would drone on forever, and you want your player to be able to walk around in relative peace and quiet. That's totally fine. But you can still throw some music in there. Look at games like Minecraft or Skyrim. Most people couldn't even tell you that Minecraft has a soundtrack off the top of their heads because it's so understated. It just randomly pipes up as you're walking around the world and can occasionally create really beautiful and striking moments for the player. Skyrim employs its music very similarly when you're just wandering around the world, with sweeping horns and strings fading in and out of the background as you traverse the snowy landscape. Why not write a bunch of really short overworld pieces for various areas and have them naturally pop up every now and then? You could even have them programmed to only go off in specific situations. For instance, you could have a song that's a minute and a half long, and that song will only play if you're nowhere near enemies, so it's unlikely the song will be interrupted. It'd be an improvement over walking around with no accompaniment. By the way, the lighting in this game is really screwed. What happened to the Duscae we saw in the demonstration video months ago? It was so bright and colorful and vivid. Even at dawn, the Duscae of this demo looks too dark. Also, you've got this weird visual filter in the game where you're making the corners of the screen darker than the rest. Stop that. It's gross. Also, Noctis looks ridiculous like this. He already suffers from the fact that he looks way better as a drawn character than he does as a CG model. You're not doing him any favors by making his face so dark. In the art and the renders, his face is easy to see. His bangs aren't really that thick. But in the actual game, if the lighting conditions aren't practically perfect in every way, it looks like his eyes are hidden behind a bandana. Is this supposed to be intentional? Because it doesn't seem very faithful to the design. I know that this is probably just the lighting that has naturally occurred as a result of the engine, I get that, but seriously, hide flashlights under his bangs if you have to, this looks silly. On that note, one final complaint for now, and then I'll shut up. Noctis. Noctis, he's so boring! I know that there are only like 3 cutscenes in this entire demo, but I came out without a single memorable moment from Noctis. Seriously, I'm the one who's been defending this guy for the last 2 years, who's been wary of its supporting cast, and I came out of this demo liking them and feeling incredibly towards Noctis. I know that he's supposed to be this character with a completely different personality than we usually see because he puts on this cool demeanor to try and seem cool and confident or whatever, but come on, guys! He does nothing in his whole demo. Nothing that even begins to be of interest, and he's your main character. I know that the characters weren't the focus of the demo, that you weren't trying to sell us on them or the story here, but you've practically de-sold me on Noctis here. I was hoping that we'd finally get to see some of the depth that I've been hearing about for years, and I saw the same brooding, quiet guy that everybody's afraid he's going to be. Granted, some of my complaint is directed towards the English dub of Noctis. Japanese Noctis sounds just like a normal guy with a relatively normal voice and tone, but English Noctis sounds like he's trying to be Batman. A slightly drowsy Batman. Alright, I'm finally done. I know that I just spent the vast majority of this video tearing the demo apart, but I do it because I care. I really do want to see this game succeed, if only because I don't want to see the console industry in Japan fall apart at the seams. That would be unfortunate. But anyway, all of the pictures of food in this demo made me really hungry. I gotta go. Hold on a second. What time is it? Oh, you gotta be kidding me! I'm late for school!